guys, welcome to Chuck and Tuck. He's Chuck, I'm Tuck, and this week we have survived winter apocalypse. It was single digits, and now it's near 80 degrees, and wearing shorts when I'm working out. Just don't judge me how slow I am. It's baby number 2 for me and my fam, so just working off the baby weight for me. So here we are. We have Chanda. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I was just thinking chocolate pandas, but Chanda, and then my old buddy Eliot Smith, who remembers from the old Ophir days for the boys' 8th grade basketball team for me. So shout out Bryce Hood and all my teammates. Luckily, Mr. Smith had a lot of patience with us back then in middle school, or he put on a good front, and I appreciate him for that. So we're going to talk all things about what led them to their journey in education. This really was inspired from a conversation Eliot and I had the other day, because we had a student who had a grandparent that influenced him. And I thought, our site leaders are so important to our culture here at BPS. You know, what led them? Because they're inspiring our teachers, setting the tone, and inspiring our kids along the way. So as we get there, Chuck, what have you been up to since the last time we saw each other?
Glad we're back in school.
Yes.
Good to have some warm weather. It's like last week never happened, once you get here, because things are so busy. And of course, what we're all dealing with is there's still all those things you have to do in February, still have to get done. However, many of us weren't working last week, so that obviously creates some challenges. But, I think we just need to enjoy this beautiful weather. I'm so glad we're able to. I know it's a really big deal, especially at the elementary level, for kids to get outside and play. And so now that they're back, I'm glad they're able to do that. And we're just transitioning in the spring. March is upon us. Kind of at the district level, we have our job fair on Saturday, and so we're already planning for next year and filling positions for that, which is always a good time. It's one of the rare times we get all of our administrators just during the school year. We're so busy where we can just get together and visit in between and before and after, and I always enjoy being around them. And I'll say about these two, and some of this shows my age, but I've been fortunate that every administrator, every leader in the district that I've had a hand in hiring them, or if they were already in the district and putting them in the current position. Chanda, Miss Myers, was actually, when I was named superintendent in 2016, she was the first administrator, building principal that I hired.
Wow.
At Ranch Heights. Yeah, so she's in her 9th year. That's why we can keep track of how long we've been in our positions. And I remember telling Chanda, kind of like other people told me, is just don't screw it up. But honestly, we knew Chanda before she had worked for us and does a great job for us. Eliot, I've known Eliot for years as well. I know you have done a great job for the district. Just good people, and we have that across the district. I know we've had Miss Krause on here, and I know you may have some other leaders come on, but we have really just good people that are making good decisions on a daily basis, just like you, Anthony, in your role, and it matters. It all matters, and I'm really proud of our site leaders, because that's really where that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the kids are. That's where the staff is, and they really represent us well. Really makes my job a lot easier when I've got good people, because I'm not worried. I trust them, and I'm just here to help and support them and get them the resources that they need. And we're all here to serve, and so I've kind of tried to lead by example with that leadership style, and hired people that fit with that as well. And these two are two great examples.
And that's great, Chuck, because what happens at the end of the day is we have this standard across the district, and then each school, that culture is a little bit different, right, based off the experience and kind of the approach of each site leader. And it really changes the pathway for our kids. They get a little bit different experience, but still it's that Bruin experience at the end of the day. So I will not give a hard time about Eliot being a basketball referee, where he talked about it beforehand. I never got a technical in a game in 8th grade. We're just going to walk away from that one. As the all-time leader in yellow cards at Independence Community College and Delta State University, I can say proudly, I probably did. So some things real quick before we hop in with our guest. We talked about beforehand, we have the bell-to-bell, no cell, which has made its way through committee, and I believe through a House vote. Still has to be passed in the Senate. That bill was authored by an old educator out of Enid, who is now the state rep out there in western Oklahoma, old ag teacher, actually talking about ag. How do you see that impacting our district moving forward?
I think something's going to pass. You've heard the governor say that's a priority for them, leadership from the House and Senate. There's bills on both sides that have passed. They're a little different. And so overall, I think for us as a district, the biggest impact would be at Bartlesville High School. At the elementary level, it's already taken care of. Obviously, it's different with as kids age and mature and have different things. Middle school has worked through that. Madison was kind of a leader in terms of already going to the bell-to-bell Central. When they began the year, they were allowed to use their phones like at lunch. And so they made the change at fall break, and it was widely supported by everyone there, except for probably some students. And so it's been a good thing. And so obviously at the high school level, I think that we talked a lot about the anxious generation, and we know that we can do better. I think things are better here. And that basically the rule here is not to have it while you're outside the class, not to have it in class. In your hallway or lunchtime. And it's a little different here because kids are so mobile. You're going to internships or tech or whatever you might be going to. That's one thing. But I personally think that that where we'll be next year will require some board approval as well. I personally would love for us to be, just like look at me. I set my cell phone right here. What a distraction that is. I mean, and what that can be to show, to be with others too about this is more important than what we're talking about, which is absolutely not true. And so I think that for us, what I would like to see, I'd love for it to be bell-to-bell. I'd love for kids not have the pressure because they're getting hit. And this is not just a kid thing. This is an adult thing as well. I mean, people are addicted to their phone. They're addicted to social media. It's not healthy for them. And I would love for our kids to have a break from that during the day. And so that's an easy thing to say, but it's a hard thing to do. Our staff is going to have to be on board for that. I know Miss LaDonna Chancellor was having some focus groups with some high school staff. Maybe, I can't remember if that was yesterday or today, just to get some feedback from them as well. I spoke about it at the rally, that we can do better. But that's what I would love. I would love, but we're going to have to do it. Our staff's going to have to be on board. Our parents are going to have to be on board. When I talk to our high school kids about it, that's what they tell me is that some of the folks that contact them the most on their phone are their parents. And so from a kid's perspective, that puts pressure on them as well because well, my mom's calling me or I'm getting this text in, which I understand that's an easy way to communicate. That's the world has shifted. And so, but I would love for our kids to not have that pressure during the day. I'd love for our teachers not to have to deal with that distraction during the day. And I think that we all can. I think we can make a difference here. I think we're making a difference as our kids come up. It'll be easier the more we go. It's hardest for kids that already have it, and so that's another thing just to kind of work through. So we'll see. Now there may be. We'll see what the legislation comes out. They may come out where there's no options for District 2. But my personal, what I think would be best for kids do not have access to their phone during the day. When they leave on their way out, then they're on the way to tech or whatever. Then get your phone out and do whatever. I'd love for them to talk to each other between classes. There's some things that really frustrate me about society in terms of kids, and not just kids, adults. Wanting to video everything. And if there's something wrong going on, let's not video it. Let's stop it. And there's some things that are just, to me, are mean. And I think that we can be better than that. And that's not just a Bartlesville thing. That's just a world thing. And so that's where I hope that we land, is that we can get to, which I realize there's probably some, if any kids hearing this are in a panic because they're addicted to their phone. So I just want to help them get better.
And it's tough, right? And especially as adults, and you're wearing a watch. We all got the watch, and it's just a notification device, and it just vibrates on your wrist, and you're just like, oh man, I got to get to that. It is a lot of pressure. Whereas we would have time to kind of think things through, and now it's just an instant, instant coffee reaction. What are you going to do about this? And it's a lot of times as administrators, you have to do that within your buildings, but it's become everything about life. And are you going to respond? Are you going to like this? And then there's that societal pressure, like you're saying, Chuck, that if you don't, then you're not being a good husband, you're not being a good dad, supporting whatever they post online. It's a lot.
It is. I agree. And that growing up in that, in the world that we're in, and I think that when you go through your developmental stages, when you go through puberty, when you go through, and you're depending, 12 to 14, and you're growing up in that world. And so and when you're that age and you get to be at the high school, a lot of times the most important people to you are your peers.
Oh yeah.
And you have that, you're much more, what research will tell you, they're much more scared of their, the death of what people think about them.
Yeah.
That perception of them as opposed to their actual death. And so you see things about, that's the number one concern is how much interactions, how many likes, what do I need to do to make people, someone dislike me or like me or add me or not, or living in that world. And also just the false sense of the world in terms of what you get hit with, because people don't really look like that. I think it's hard for girls. It's hard for all of us, especially young ladies as they're growing. People don't look like that. I mean, it's not reality. Yeah. And people think all these everything is so wonderful all the time for everybody. It's not. I mean, it's just, and we need to help our kids learn to deal with it. So, as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about this topic.
No, I think we all have to. It takes all of us rowing in the right direction to present a change. And like you said, it starts younger, like in your buildings, where when they get to this point, they get here with me at the high school, they've already got that mindset built and they have expectations going forward. It's hard to make that shift now when they're just used to just free reign. It's gotten better, but they still have that. It's that faint buzz in your pocket, right? Like, am I missing something? The stress of it. It's tough. I will say this year with Fast Food Valentines, we didn't film as much when we went to the 100 stops where we dropped off, candy and roses to young ladies and ladies working across the community. But the big thing was just enjoy the moment, be in the moment, and seeing kids not have their device and just be part of that exchange of authentic kindness that's not being reciprocated. Like, there's no expectation back, there's no light, there's no hug, like there's nothing. It was pretty refreshing. So they're completely capable of doing. And there's other school districts across the country, and this is a movement definitely that Jonathan Haidt and his research has started in his book. Because there's a template bill that people usually start with, and they, like most things in life, guys, most bills aren't original, but it starts a movement, and it's good for our school districts, good for our state, it's good for our country moving forward.
It just helps our kids, and kids need to be involved. Humans need other humans. Yeah, and so that's why I'm very pleased that we've made some shifts here to get our kids involved. Things like the 7-period day. Kids need to be involved with. That's why I love any athletic or activities, whatever it is, just for kids to be involved with without their device. Church groups or just whatever. That's what research tells you. That's important. Yeah. And kids need that because, and the thing about that is if you're not doing that, the concern is, what are you doing when you're, instead of being at practice or being at youth group or being wherever? Well, it's really easy to get sucked into using your phone because that is very entertaining. Yeah. And so kids need that, and we all need that too. And I think our parents also need to help us with that as well, because think about as a kid growing up, and then you got little ones around you, and you're like, wait a minute, I need to check my Facebook page. Let me look at this first. And so little kids, a lot of times I see them. You see it all the time at restaurants. Yeah. They are, well, wait a minute, I've got to look at whatever this is. Yeah. And so that you're growing up thinking, well, gosh, that's more important than me. Yeah. And so I think we can all be better.
No, definitely. And I think our worries, like in the early 2000s, are so different. Like the other day on Alumni Chat, an episode that came out with Brandon Thompson, who owns Pure Image Barbershop. Yeah. He graduated in 1999. Fresh fades come out of that place, let me tell you. I've been going there for a long time. But we were talking about like LimeWire. Like, I finally had to admit that I ruined the family computer because I had LimeWire and I thought I was downloading a Cisco song and it was just a virus. So I had to come out and admit that the other day. No longer could we play Oregon Trail in the beautiful arcade game that was built in and have what was it, an ox? Like, you get that big animal. Yeah. But that was childhood, and like having a computer lab. I remember Miss Ledbetter at Oak Park Elementary, growing up as an Oak Park Panther, like so excited to walk down the hallway with my classmates. Things have changed, and they'll continue to change. And, I still have 16 years till my oldest daughter graduates, so I'm sure I will be a lot different. Like, technology will be a lot different by then, and there'll be a whole nother battle, but it just takes all of us.
And I do want to mention one thing, too, that watches will be included in that. I mean, so I know that's part of it. I mean, which I know in fact, I'm having that personal conversation right now about, I need to go back to getting rid of my watch now. And thinking about that, but it's handy. I mean, it's convenient, and for exercise purposes, I like it, and other things too. But it's distracting. Yeah. And just like right now, if I get this, I'm going to sit and look at it and think about. And that's. I think just imagine growing up with that.
And it also, like, when you get roasted on the internet, like, it just constantly just comes through. And that would happen a lot, like, in the beginning of my career, like, working with communities and private sector companies, like, brands, and something doesn't go the way you thought would go. Or, like, they were locked in, like, this is our logo, and you change the whole thing, and it just, and you're just like, okay, let's just throw this away for today. We're just going to pivot away from that. So, speaking of pivoting, let's get to our educators today. Chanda, can you tell me what got you into education?
I can. So I always say I'm a late bloomer because I didn't even start college until I was 28 years old. So had my kids really young, and my choice was to stay home with them. And when my daughter was old enough for pre-K, I thought, well, I need to go to work too. And so as a young mom, that school schedule was very appealing to me. So I thought, all right. I got a job as a paraprofessional and a teacher's assistant. And it was at Skytook at Mars Elementary. And I was there for about a month working with a very difficult student, but was in a classroom with a highly talented educator. And I knew right then that's what I wanted to do. So the following January, I started college. And so during that time, a couple of years, I did work as a para and an assistant. But then a couple of years while I was still in college, I shifted to insurance, and I worked for State Farm. And I kind of had a moment there. I went through, as I was going through college, I also went through the agency school, and they were getting ready to put me in the agency pool. And so I had a decision to make. Did I want to go that direction, or did I want to go in education? And I can still remember the look on my husband's face whenever I said, I really want to be a teacher. And he just shook his head because it was vastly different, the potential income, certainly. So I was hired by Miss Krause at Wilson, and I taught pre-K and third grade couple years, and then I went to Caney Valley and I taught third grade there, and I was going to get my master's at Oklahoma Wesleyan. And so it was the end of my fifth year teaching, and the position for Ranch Heights came up, and so I just decided I would go for it. And I always shake my head at Mr. McCauley because he did hire me. I didn't have a lot of experience in education at the time, but I think that he knew my heart, and it is for people, and it is for children, not just getting an education, but being that person for them, that it might be their one person that makes the difference for them. Even now, I have some kids that will tell me all the time, I really wish you would quit telling us to be kind. You say it all the time. And I know that they don't mean that. I do talk about it a lot. But being that influence is really important to me, to be able to be what I would call the hands and feet, and to make sure that I am truly seeing every person as a person, and always giving them the dignity that they deserve as a creation. So that's how I got into education. So 28, that was a long time ago now, but I've been here for 9 years. So thank you, Mr. McCauley, for the opportunity.
And that's amazing. And it starts with having that heart and recognizing that what we're doing is we're part of that self-discovery process as educators.
Absolutely.
And like you said, that dignity, if there's one thing we can provide when they walk into a building, is a sense of dignity.
Absolutely.
I like, thinking of basketball is when we watch film and watch tape and watch replays, one thing I like to do is I like to replay in my head my experience with other educators, right? Do they go out of their way to say hi to somebody, right? Hey, I hope you have a good day. Learn their name. They might never have them in their classroom. They may never be on their caseload, but what do they do to make them feel welcomed in that building? Because you never know. Like we talked about the cell phone and social media influence, we don't know what's behind that kid, because across our district, socioeconomics is so different, so vastly different across your guys' building, all across the east side and west side, right? I grew up in Oak Park, completely different socioeconomics than somebody at Wayside. But we all go through similar things.
Absolutely.
And that battle to discover where we're going to go, that's why all of us are sitting at this table today. Eliot, so tell me what led you. I kind of know, so I'm a little biased here. I think it's a great story, so go ahead and tell the listeners.
I've known since fourth grade I've wanted to be in education. My fourth grade homeroom teacher, Mrs. Baker, just the way she taught and the way she made us feel great. That's why I wanted to go into education. She led the way she taught us math, and that's why I wanted to be a math teacher. I didn't want to teach elementary, but I wanted to teach math some way. So since fourth grade, wanted to be a math teacher. Went and taught math at the mid-high. After I graduated from college at Northwestern, I was actually in the stands at Bartlesville High School watching a football game. Jason Langham saw me up in the stands, made me come down to him, and he said, "You about done with college?" And I said, "Got another semester left." He said, "Well, when you get done, come find me and we'll see what we can do about a job." February, before I graduated, applied for a job. He interviewed me, got a math job in February. Before I graduated, taught math at the mid-high for 3 years. Went to Barnstall for 8. Then did some administration work at Barnstall as well. In 2012, I applied for an administrator job at the mid-high as an assistant principal. Mr. Langham hired me. I remember going in into Mr. McCauley was in HR at that time, sit down with him. And so they allowed me to come back, and I've been here ever since. But kind of my philosophy, why I went from switching from teaching to administration is what can I do just outside of my classroom I can help more if I'm in an administration role. I can help everyone instead. And really kind of my philosophy that I have, and I have it on my signature, on my email signature, is work hard, have fun, be nice today and every day. So, and we're not going to be judging people. Everyone makes a mistake. Do better today than you did yesterday. Do better tomorrow than what you did today.
And that's so true, right? Because we're human too. We have other influences. We all got kids, right? Things happen when we show up in the building, but it's almost like that new show on Apple TV. You just kind of got to flip that switch when you show up at work and just be there in the moment. And what can you do to positively impact kids that day? Because that day might be a lot worse for them than whatever you experienced before you peeked your head through the door.
And I'm at the point now in my career, this is my 24th year in education, where I'm having students of the kids that I taught.
Yeah.
So, and that's really fun when you see them come in and, Mr. Smith, you taught me when I was in high school, and now I've got their kids at Wayside. So that's fun.
Yeah.
Having that, and then seeing kids like you, I still call you kid, see at the coffee shop or something,
Yeah.
and then that you're where you're at, and so congratulations there. But it's great seeing the how time goes on, and I don't feel that old, so it's great. So.
Well, my doctor said my knees, when I went to get the last cortisone shots, right into the kneecap. Do not recommend boys and girls out there in Bruinland. But they were like, your knees are like 65. You know that, Tuck? And I was like, well, it was a lot of soccer back in the day. Thank you for sharing that, Eliot. So what do you think has changed most in education throughout your time?
That's a great question. One thing I have heard, and I believe this to be true, it's that a lot of people say the kids have changed. And I would disagree. Our kids have not changed. Their experiences have. What they have to deal with on the daily basis, the amount of support they have at home within their core unit, it's very different. It used to be much more familial, a lot of family, a lot of people were invested in lives, and now we have a lot of people that are doing it on their own. And so that's where I feel like we come in and the education system is to be that next layer of support for our students we can't teach home, we can't control home, but whenever they walk through our doors, we have the absolute control of their experiences. And hopefully what we can give to them then, again, like I talked to you before, it's very important that they're validated, that they're seen, that they're heard. And then when we get them in that good space where they trust us and they are able to focus, they're regulated. There's a lot of regulation that we have to do in elementary. Once we get those things done, then we can really hit hard on educating them and giving them the knowledge that they need to succeed in the future, now and in the future. So I would say their experiences are what's the biggest difference. From phones to screen time. I call it digital neglect whenever we as parents are more focused on our phones and our children are not getting that face-to-face interaction. Children very young, not able to have conversations with other people because they are so in tune to a screen. Those are really big experiences that we are up against then whenever they come into our building. And I will say, even one of the things from the anxious generation that has caused me to pause as a building leader is we want to really educate our families about what happens at home. But then it made me think, well, how much screen time do we allow in the classroom?
Mm-hmm.
And so we just recently created a survey that we're going to be sending out to our teachers just to kind of gauge how much time do we spend, because we might need to make some adjustments inside the classroom to model what is needed outside the classroom and in our community. So the biggest change is just their experiences, and they're vast. They are more... They have more ability to go out and see a very difficult world than they really should ever have known. And a lot of times the experiences are virtual, and the experiences aren't even real life. So those are some things that our kids butt up. They have not changed. They're still born, and they look just as beautiful and lovely as they always have, but the experiences have definitely influenced them differently.
I agree. I think also letting them know that, giving them the attention that they're probably missing out at on home due to the, here, take this device and go play, or go do this. And part of the Anxious Generation book was letting them go play, maybe some structured play or even unstructured play, letting them learn how to problem solve with other children without adults having to intervene all the time.
Right.
Not being hoverboard helicopter parents with them, even at school on the playground, let them learn how to develop those skills to problem solve or to conflict resolution without intervening all the time.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's where we need to go. That's for the future, is where we need to double check and help those kids out with that, is letting them do it by themselves.
Yeah. It was like, pardon me, it was like doing the monkey bars back in the day at elementary. It's like sometimes you just got to go for it.
Yep.
And I can still hear my mom yelling at me, like, you better get in the house and you better clean your room. And you better be home before the street lights come on.
That's right.
And there was so much development just from being outside.
Absolutely.
And when you have a mixed age group, like we used to play baseball. I know baseball is not as big. I love baseball, but there's just something you could do. Just go out there. Not everybody had a glove. You just had a ball and you just played till it got dark and a little bit after dark. Same thing with basketball. It's just bringing kids back to that.
Right.
Low stakes social development outside of the classroom, so that when they come in, they can handle a little bit of conflict. I'm not sitting next to Sally, my best friend, right?
Absolutely.
Those things that seem to break kids now and break them down can happen outside the classroom, so they can be better in the classroom. So where do you think you have improved most as a leader through your time as a site leader at Ranch Heights?
I would say for me, it's being okay with not everybody agreeing with me. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the time, my work is to make sure that I get everybody on board as much as possible. And at first, I mean, that was my goal, is 100%. But what I realized, if I got 100%, then there was something that was off in my presentation, because I'm not going to put out something like, for example, I talked about screen time to my staff probably about 5 years ago, and we were discussing it, and I had said something about how at restaurants, it's very easy to give your child a screen, and then you have a screen, and then there's no conversation happening. And at that time, that was a very unpopular opinion. And it was also at that time where I thought, but I know this is what is, we see this happening in our classrooms as our pre-Kers are coming in. We're seeing that this is absolutely affecting them. So I remember thinking, it's okay that not everybody agrees with me. If I believe what I'm looking at and what I am doing is what is right and good, it's always right to do the right thing, even if everyone doesn't agree. And so for me, I think I've really grown in that area. I'm like, okay, that's okay. You don't have to agree with me. I don't always agree with you, but we can still have a conversation. And so not agreeing doesn't mean that we don't like each other. It just means now that we have differing opinions, and when we all bring our opinions, then we can find the best solution. And so really, I think that's just opening that up, not feeling so determined that everybody see it my way, but now feeling that it's okay for people to butt up against what I have to say, and I learn from them. And I think that's really important. So that's more in that area. I will, when it comes to students, I feel like the ability to be empathetic and compassionate and yet also be that strong, firm, hard love sometimes needs to happen. The balance of that has definitely been an area that I've grown in. I can still be empathetic and compassionate, and then I can still give that strong, but we also have boundaries in our behaviors, and we have boundaries in how we respond to people. So I think that's, with students, an area that I've grown in.
And that's amazing because, 100% is so hard. There's always going to be something that's a little off, somebody doesn't agree with, or somebody's just going to be in opposition, because that's just how the good Lord made them, right?
Absolutely.
And that's okay. We don't all have to fit together like a puzzle,
Right.
But we all have to be working for what is best for kids at the end of the day.
At the end of the day.
And I think, that is part of development as a leader, is finding that as long as we're rowing in the right direction, that it's okay. And it's so hard to feel that pressure sometimes. I know Chuck feels this with snow days. That's got to be hard. I'm glad that's not me, my guy. But for me, like I said earlier, like that was the hardest part. Like, I can put an employee on a performance improvement plan. Like, I'm used to that in the private sector. But when I have to sit across from a mom and her kid and tell them they're going to get let go from their internship, that's extremely difficult. It's so much different than the private sector, because it's like your heart is right there. Like, you love that kid, right? But it's like, okay. But you think back to the educators you had in your life, and how do they handle it? And I think back, how did Mr. Sears handle me as being a crazy 7th grade boy, right? He would set me down and say, okay, son, like, things did go great on the last day of school. Probably shouldn't have thrown that apple in a crowd. Good job, you. But, we still love you, and we'll see you back in August. Like,
Absolutely.
How can we just make that pivot? And it takes a lot of grace,
Yes.
And that's acquired grace sometimes. Eliot, how do you think you've grown?
Same with as Chanda, is learning that you're not going to be able to please everyone, and learning to deal with that, and learning that not everyone's going to be happy all the time. But then also time management. Mr. McCauley always talks about what quadrant you're going to spend, where you're spending most of your time at in those 4 quadrants. But you're not always going to make everyone happy, and how we deal with that, but also making sure that everyone feels heard, and making sure that you're continuing working on those relationships. But then also one thing that I've always tried to strive on is I'm not perfect, and that there's always room to grow. And so learning, I'm always excited to learn about what type of professional development that we're going to have as administrators, whether it's through our summer conference in Oklahoma City, or what Mr. McCauley is going to bring in during our leadership days during the summer, where we've done crucial conversations, how we can get better in talking with our employees about things that we need to get better at or grow on. So just things like that.
Those tough conversations are hard to have, regardless if it's with a kid, a parent, a stakeholder, a board member. Like, it doesn't matter. But that dialogue is so crucial, that we have the dialogue. We can't just think because we don't agree politically or religiously or on curriculum. Like, we have a disagreement doesn't mean that, hey, we're never going to talk again. This isn't like I'm going to unfollow you and ghost you. Like, this is like, how are we going to work through that and still have a conversation, right? We can disagree on everything and still talk about how did Luka Doncic end up from the Mavericks to the Lakers.
Right.
NBA rigged. It's a whole thing on Twitter. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you get past that? And that's tough. Chuck, how do you think you've changed since we first met to now?
Well, that's a good question. I think when your responsibilities change, and honestly, from a professional standpoint, my role as high school principal, that was probably the most fun I had, and that was one that had been assistant principal, and obviously, but what I enjoyed about that role is just being with kids. The energy you get from young people is amazing, and kids are amazing. And of course, and went to Career Evolve, got an HR, and so really it was an office setting, for the district. And then what I do now, which I enjoy now a lot, just because I work a lot with the community stakeholders, kind of on bringing big things all the way through, like doing things that, whether it's starting an ag program or making the STEM program resources so that we can be a distinguished district, just one of 20 in the country, and bringing people together, whether it's, sometimes it even gets at the statewide level about, in 2018, our first year teacher pay was $32,000.
Wow.
And so we kind of led the charge, and now it's 43. And so that's just the base. We pay things on top of that too. But so I would say really trying to just, it's all the same, even when I was an assistant principal, as opposed to doing the things now. I think what was most important is knowing the kids, knowing the people, knowing our adults, being available, being present. I know it was really important to me that when kids walked across the stage, I could call them by name. And I had to work hard to do that because I just had them for 2 years, and a bunch of them went to tech, and it was kind of hard to see them.
Yeah.
But studying yearbooks and all those kind of things too. But that's important.
Yeah.
And I think that that was important at that role. 20 years later, what I do now, it's still important, and what I do, is people know how you are.
Yeah.
And I think whatever role you're in, and we're all leaders. Teachers are leaders. I mean, they're leading classrooms every day too. I think a big difference in a lot of teachers that don't have interest in being in administration is because they don't want to have to they want to deal with other adults. I mean, they want to deal with kids. And so I think continuing to grow, but also realize it's really that your core person, you need to make sure you don't lose that.
Yeah.
Just because you're in whatever role you're in, you think you don't still prioritize. You demonstrate you prioritize your role as a husband and a father, and it's important that my leadership for my people, and then also interacting with kids. But that's making sure that you have your priorities in order, because I feel like that hasn't changed for me. When I was teaching and coaching high school basketball 30 years ago, as opposed to what I'm doing now. So I think that's something for us all to realize too, that the more things change, the more things stay the same. What's important, and knowing who you are, having the confidence. That's probably a big thing. Is just when you've accomplished some things, when you've made some things, you have more. You realize, you have more experiences, and so you think about, okay, that walkout was a challenge.
Yeah.
And so remember those days, and some people, dealing with that, and all the things that came up with COVID, really difficult stuff. And but you just try to continue to have the same spirit, be the same person, keep moving forward. And I think that it's easier to get distracted now because of, like we've talked about, social media and just the world that we live in, news cycles, and how people get information or misinformation or whatever, and how quickly those bubbles can come up and become, and realizing, once you have those realizing what's important and what's a big deal and what's not, because it's real easy to get distracted by some of these things that are, sometimes it's just a vocal minority and that's just the vocal minority of anything you do. There may be a vocal minority, but once you can kind of get to the point and have the confidence to realize, that's just the same handful, not just people, but just a handful of numbers. Like, I've got all these other things, but it's so hard because those negative ones are the ones that stick with you. You have all these positive experiences, but you got this one negative. I'm thinking, man, and you have to be able to have the spirit to step back and think, okay, but we're doing this. It's going to be okay. Don't take this personal. Yeah. Think about a crucial conversation, and that's, I think probably has been that, just to stay focused in who you are, and still making sure that you got a servant's heart.
Yeah, and the hardest conversation to have is with the person looking back in the mirror every morning at yourself. Right. And we, as we age, cannot forget to dream.
That's right.
And the same thing goes for our kids. Same thing goes for all of our teachers in our district. Just dream. We're still kids at the end of the day, like Eliot was saying with me. And I really like what you said when you brought up know who you are and stick to that. Like, when we talked a few years ago, which led back to raising my family and coming back to Bartlesville, I will tell you that, I was making more money than I thought I would ever make. Being out on the coast, being able to lobby and have all these perks and do all these things. And at the end of the day, it's like, who am I? Who are my core beliefs? Where do I feel safe? Where do I feel connected? Or am I just part of the system, right? And what impact am I really making? So for me, not catching the flight back out to Sacramento, right, and just letting that go, and then just realizing there's a bigger calling, right? And somehow, back in my hometown, here we are, right? And we all have those moments, in like we talked about, Chuck, with our buddy Taylor Doe. There and then moments, right? And then this happened, and then that door didn't open, and I was beating on that door, and I was praying, and I was hoping and dreaming it would open, but it didn't. But it didn't for a reason. It was just 6 to 18 months later, something pop up, or two years down the road. But it's hard to say that, but have that conversation with yourself in the mirror. And as parents, it's hard to have that sometimes, because when we work in education, we don't have a break from children, right? We have our kids and we have all the issues, and especially at the elementary level, right? Because those are so little kids, they're so impressionable. You are the first to impact on those lives. Absolutely. And who they're going to be, and still have time for yourself. And that's why I love with the summer, with the professional development, like you brought up, Elliot, it's a little time to breathe, look back, have more of that macro view, not the micro view, because sometimes we can be myopic and so nearsighted and focused. So speaking of districting, and let's talk about some things are changing for our attendance boundaries for our elementary schools, and for also impact kids going to Central and Madison. Now there will be some ways where kids can stay where they're at, but kids coming up, there will be some changes due to some growth in our community. What can someone expect if they're redistricted into your school at Ranch Heights, and what's kind of the culture there?
Yeah, okay. Well, both Eliot and I, we called all of our parents that are now in the Ranch Heights district beginning next year, and many of them chose to stay at Wayside, understandable, because that's where they've been, that's who they know. We have a few that are coming to us, and then we expect even more as people move into the district and they start their new school careers. And so what they will see when they come to Ranch Heights is I think two things. There's first of all an immense amount of joy. Our people are joyful people, and it is a quality and characteristic that a lot of people don't get to see anymore. And just the welcome at the beginning of the day, whether it's our PE teacher, Coach Show, he has a name for everybody. He hollers out at everyone. In the car line, they're dancing. When they're greeting their bus kids in the back, they have music going. It is just a culture of welcome. And whenever you walk in, again, going back to that dignity, last year that was our focus, is deepening dignity. This year our focus is being a hope punk. I mean, just being that kind of renegade, rebellious, I'm going to be hopeful no matter what comes my way. And so those are the focuses that we have, so that when students come, the expectation is every morning that teachers, you greet them at the door and you look in their eyeballs and you get a first sense of what is happening. But before they even get to the classroom, they've been greeted out of the car, they've been greeted off the bus, they've been greeted as they walk through the doors, both sets that we have. They've been greeted as they're in the hallway, they go to the cafeteria, because it is so important for people to be absolutely seen. And I think that is one of the gifts that our culture gives to not only our students, but our staff. So joy, that's the first thing. And then I would say that the second thing, I already hit on it, is just that dignity to be seen, heard, and known. We do not have a building of perfect people, but we have a building that are filled with people who absolutely love and cherish others. And we have our days. They're not all perfect days, and there are days whenever we struggle. We are kinder than we feel. We practice that a lot. That's something I took from my assistant principal, Miss Imhoff. She says, I'm going to be kinder than I feel right now, and she's great at it. And just to model kindness, empathy, care. We get those foundational things that every person in this world needs, and they feel good and safe, then we can really skyrocket the learning. And sometimes we get that opposite. We want to focus and double down on making sure that they're getting the learning, but we haven't made sure that they are safe emotionally and physically. So joy and just dignity. That's the culture of our building. There's a lot of laughter, and then there's a lot of dignity, and then there's the hard work of learning. And it is hard work, and it is good work, and it's worthy work. So that's kind of what you will get when you come to the ranch, as we call it so affectionately.
I'm going to say ditto to that. We're going to have fun. We're going to work hard, and we're going to be nice to one another. Yeah. when they get out of the car, we're gonna greet them. We have a big car line out front. We have about 7 or 8 people helping kids out of the car. We're greeting them as they get out of the car. Then at the bus line, we have our PE teachers out helping them, greeting them as they come in the door. We have them greeting them as they come in the cafeteria. Teachers are at their door 15 minutes before school starts. They're either giving them, kids have a choice of either a high five, a elbow, or a handshake, some type, or a side hug or something like that. But we want the kids to feel like that the teachers or anybody, that their kids are happy to be there. And then throughout the day, in the one thing I've learned about elementary school is that when they're walking in line, the teachers kind of want them to be quiet in the hallway. I had to learn that, teachers getting on to me, like, Mr. Smith, please don't talk to the kids while they're in the line.
It's different than high school where you can just like, hey, what's up?
How's it going?
Yeah.
That was one thing I had to learn the hard way from teachers, giving me the stink eye. But I learned that, so I'm trying to be nicer about that. But, we just want the kids to feel like they're welcome. We want their parents to know that they're going to be safe while they're in our care. Yes. We have high expectations for academics, but then also we're going to have fun over there.
Yeah.
We want kids to know we're going to come back, every day. So we're gonna have a good time.
Yeah.
You guys have experienced a lot of growth, right? Eliot, the Wayside campus finished up construction last year or earlier this year.
This is our first year at the new site at Wayside.
You could tell me it's 2020. I'd be like, okay, that sounds good. It's all a blur since then. And then Chanda, you'll be done kind of into the semester.
Yeah, and with the new building, and then they'll do renovations over the summer, and it should be complete by the end of July. So everything's on schedule, and it's going well. It's exciting.
Yeah, Anthony, you should go to the Ranch Heights current office. And so if you go to Miss Meyer's office, you'll see, and her office is not much bigger than this table, and you'll see that Miss Myers and also Assistant Principal Emhoff, and that they share an office.
Yeah.
But while some construction is going on too, so it's and if you look at their outer office, there's the one bathroom that they have for staff that they all have to wait, and you're not sure whether they come to see the principal or you're going to the bathroom.
You never know.
And then the attendance office is right there, and then the nurse is right there. I mean, it's everyone. It's pretty incredible how many people are operating in that small of a space. So they will, I think, greatly appreciate.
Absolutely.
Because you're at over 600 kids at your site. In Eliot, you're over 700.
Right.
So our 2 largest elementary schools within our district.
That's right.
So growing pains happen.
Yeah.
And part of growing pains is redistricting, right?
Right.
And one thing we can't control is where houses are going to be developed in our community and where that's going to go. We can only kind of react to that and try to positively impact kids during that change.
Right.
And that's where it comes from, setting that standard at the district level, that regardless if you do get shifted, right, or your older brother goes through and graduates from Wayside, right, moves on to Central, that and the younger one has to go somewhere else. Still the same standards and expectations, right? Still the same love and care, and feeling that dignity when you walk into our sites. So speaking of educators, we have a cool partnership that is getting launched with Oklahoma Wesleyan.
Okay.
So it's called the BPS Future Educators Academy. So LaDonna Chancellor, Michael Harp, and myself worked with Jason Flick, who's the Dean of Education over at OKWU. Jason's a 2000 grad of BHS, former Bruin, played basketball back in the heyday in the old gym. So he came to us with an idea of getting kids engaged. We already have about 13 kids that are seniors that serve within our classroom as teaching interns their senior year. As well as we have a large group, probably about 20, that go through the teacher prep program over with our friends at Tri-County Tech. So how do we merge that experience and kind of continue their development, not only in the classroom with that experience, in the mentorship, but as well as the basic pedagogy and classroom management skills. So kids will now take 2 OKWU classes for free. That'll be 1 to 2 days per week start next year as a senior, and then the other days will be in a BPS classroom. As well as we get them in our recruitment funnel to come back and work for us, because it starts now. And we have a lot of kids that are interested in it, and they might not necessarily have time to go over to teacher prep their junior year over at Tech. This is a good way to catch them and get them hooked up. And they get a scholarship if they complete it, and they go to OKWU. So there's some financial benefits when you graduate through the academy. So excited about that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mentioned, I actually heard a presentation, Dave Schuler, at a national superintendent's conference outside Chicago, and spoke about, that was one of the things that he had started at their district, and it was really about identifying high school kids that would have an interest in that. And, because what the research tells you, most of your folks that are teaching for you in your building, they grew up in the area. I mean, maybe not right there, but close. This is a good example of that, the four of us sitting here. And many that are in high school don't realize that, especially if you're like some of us who are first generation college students, man, if I would have known, when I'm that Eliot, when he was in fourth grade, he knew he wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't know that at that time. But if you think about that, you can go and graduate, especially if you got this partnership, pick up some additional classes, get some training. You can graduate from college, get some hours at Wesleyan. You can graduate at 21, 22 and start teaching. And then here you're making, you're making mid 40s with insurance and retirement. And that's get your really career kick started and get you in there too, right? Kind of growing your own. Because those folks are generally, you're going to stay. I mean, if you find it, not everyone will, because they may choose they need to go do something different. But I know I really appreciate our relationship with Wesleyan University. I know I talked to Jim Dunn about this, and of course, and he was all aboard. And which is easy for us to have these ideas. Let's get this done, but you have to talk to the people that actually do the work. People like you and Miss Chancellor, and getting with Mr. Flick, and then, of course, and our principals here too. So I'm really excited about that. I think that's something that we have to, we can sit around and moan and groan about how many emergency certified teachers are in Oklahoma. That's all across the country. What are we going to do about it? We have kids to serve, and I think this is a good example of that. Really excited about that. Appreciate everyone's work.
Yeah, we're super excited. The recruitment for current sophomores and current juniors starts on this Friday, so last day of February. So that starts, and then next week at our high school campus, we'll kick off recruitment for our first cohort of students who will be on the path to earn their associate's degree by the time they earn their high school diploma and walk across the stage at Custer Stadium. So hoping for like a group of 5 to 10, because I think our cohort, our friends over in Bixby, with Superintendent Miller, lots of things there we could talk about, but they started with 8 and they've already grown substantially. So Bixby started at 8, then we can definitely be 5 through 10.
Sure.
So we're dipping back into the old call high days. Apologize to my friend, especially Coach Hughes, for bringing this up as a Sooner High Spartan, but we're dipping back where we're providing that opportunity, because it's like it's less than $6,000 for them to get their associates while in high school through the partnership with Tulsa Community College. And there's so many guardrails for them. Like if they don't turn in an assignment or they get less than a 70%, like an alert goes out to their academic counselor at their high school, as well as they get an email. And if they do that a couple times, then they have to go through a mandatory virtual study hall. Like there's repercussions. And, that's not always the case when kids take concurrent classes. We don't have that visibility, but that was a big reason why we went with TCC. So excited about our college academy kicking off. A lot of work behind the scenes to make that happen. So we've had a lot of things happen. And speaking of service learning, I know the governor tweeted out, speaking of social, he tweeted out the impact of apprenticeships and internships. And I know there's some legislation in the works that will kind of lower the barrier of entry for small businesses to allow kids to come to their site to get that experience, because anytime with an unpaid position, there is a liability anytime you have anybody at your facility. So we're excited about that and that potential, so we can expand our partnership, because we have over 200 kids either working or doing an internship. So the need for additional partners is big. So anything we can do to reduce that barrier to give kids not only a great academic experience here within BPS, but as well as giving them some real world soft skill development as well as some hard skill development.
Like, I appreciate that. I hear I'm on several groups, but one of the groups I visit with is with the State Chamber of Commerce, and Scott Bilger's involved with, and so I have a group of superintendents, and we're part of bringing some legislation forward to get changed on updating some graduation requirements. But our discussion is about the internships, and it's interesting how across the state, many districts, of course, they maybe don't have the community resources that take kids in, but also just the sometimes it's easier to come up with ways not to do something than it is to come up with ways to do something.
Yeah.
And so what I'm very proud about our district is we found ways where we could get our kids doing these internships. And so worked with our community, and then you just blown it out of the water in terms of having over 200 kids. And that's important, having the right people in the right place that has the skills and ability to do that. But because it's interesting hearing from all the different schools, and it's like, well, no, the legislation has to be passed, or these things have to get passed to do this. Well, yeah, there's probably that's probably true. Wouldn't hurt wouldn't hurt, but it's done.
Yeah.
So you can make things happen if you can just focus on what can you do, not necessarily what you can't do.
Yeah, because for every Bartlesville, there's a Nowata, there's a Newcastle and a Newkirk, like out there across the state, and Alva, shout out Northwestern. So my dad worked out at Atwoods for a little bit a couple years ago. That's a ways out there. I drove out there one time. But I'll tell you that, like, how do we empower that? Because the brain drain is real, regardless if you're Bartlesville and we're close to 40,000 people and we're a micropolitan off on our own, or if you're over in Nowata or Barnstall, right? How are you going to retain good talent? Well, just like the Future Educators Academy, you got to grow your own, right? You're going to get some move-ins. You're going to get people through marriage that are going to come into to your community, or the move-ins through your businesses within your business community. But it starts with, how do you make that positive impact? And we have some other things we're working on that are not quite yet ready to publish, as they say. But we're at the table. We're helping making those decisions, and Chuck's doing a great job of leading that. And it's my favorite part of my job, outside of being with kids, is to be out there, and it reminds me of my life in the private sector. It's just bringing people to the table and just say, hey, Eliot, what do you need? What's going to make a positive impact, and what you do in your day-to-day? Because I'm sure a Bruin could help you fulfill that spot. So thank you both for what you do for our kids. And Eliot, thank you for having grace with me as a teenage boy. Big shout out to you, and being a referee, because that life's not easy, my guy. That life's not easy. So we look forward to seeing everybody on next episode. He's Chuck. I'm Tuck. Bruins forever. Let's go.